Okay, now we're ready to go into Unit 5. I've done a more complete PowerPoint for you to look through to help you guide your readings if that is helpful for you, but I wanted to just point out a few things that struck out for me. The first is that studies have shown that when we think about what complicates family-school relationships, it isn't that it's hard for educators or schools to reach out to parents actually, but it's schools that are most challenging for parents to reach. And I know that often when I tell teachers this, it's a surprise to them because in our experience, we know how difficult parents sometimes can be. But in fact, when academics have studied this, in fact, it's schools that are really impeding this process of relationship building. So therefore, it's incumbent on us as educators to take the lead in eliminating or at least reducing the traditional barriers to parent involvement. And again, in the PowerPoint, I review some of these barriers, and they're also mentioned in the readings as well. In order to encourage family involvement, though, we really first have to understand families, and that's what this unit really talks about. So we are now concentrating on a family-centered approach in order to help us understand families. This approach is based on an ecological model of the family, and I think really helps us move towards greater family involvement by helping us understand families. Key concepts include seeing families as a system and a goodness of fit model. And inherent in both these concepts is the idea that no individual can be understood without recognizing how he or she fits within the entire family. Family systems theory requires us to stop operating as if children existed in isolation. And again, this contradicts somewhat the idea of children being individuals, isolated, and independent, something which is deeply embedded in the culture and values of the United States, and something, again, that Small addressed a couple of units ago. Okay, so a couple of things to remember as you're reading through this week's readings. The first is that most parents want and are able to help their children grow into healthy, capable adults. Of course, there are always outliers, but in general, we should assume that most parents reside in this area, that they're actually wanting and able to support their children. Parents don't have fixed capacities and needs. Just like their children, they're developing and changing, and therefore need support through difficult transitional phases of life. Relationships between educators and families really have to be based on equity and respect, equality and respect. Our first priority is to establish and maintain this relationship, the relationship between educators and families, because that's the vehicle through which growth and change can occur. So I have a number of questions for you to consider this week, and I hope that you will post your reflections on the discussion board. Again, you don't have to answer all of these questions. They're prompts, but I hope they will help form part of our conversation. The first is I'm really curious about your responses to family systems theory. In this week's readings, barriers to effective collaboration with families are addressed. And I'm curious what might be some additional challenges you face that might not have been highlighted in the readings this week. How might we respond to these difficulties empathetically and respectfully? The ecological perspective emphasizes the interconnectedness between organisms and environment, as well as the fact that no individual can be understood without recognizing how he or she fits in with the entire family. This was addressed earlier. So thinking about that, what impact does this view have on the traditional educational American view of students as individuals, isolated, and independent? And how might this ecological perspective change the roles then of teachers and educators? Then we talk about the goodness of fit model, which asserts that there should be a good match between the needs of families and community resources and support, like schools. What are some examples, though, of mismatches? How do you imagine improving the goodness of fit for your families? And this is something that, at least personally, can be really challenging for me. And finally, how do you gather the information to know a family's needs, what they need for goodness of fit, and then how do you assess your efforts afterwards? Okay, I very, very much look forward to another really interesting and reflective conversation on the discussion board. I again want to encourage you to contact me with any questions or concerns. One of my mantras that I tell my students is to contact me early and contact me often. You're never bothering me. It is helpful for me to hear where you are and what you need. So continue to reach out to me, and I will be hearing from you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.